Hello, BookTube. It's Tuesday, and that's time for Tag Tuesday. I almost forgot. So I looked around, and it turns out that on this particular Tuesday, as on many other Tuesdays, I am not tagged by anybody, because nobody likes me, because I smell. So I decided to grab the bull by the horns and make my own tag. And I have as my inspiration the fact that Britta and I, my little miniature schnauzer, and I just went recently up to the old farmhouse in Vermont to visit a fellow booktuber, to visit Mark Richardson at Richardson Reads and his family. And we had a wonderful time. We were surrounded by books that weren't our own. We were surrounded by rituals that weren't our own. We were pampered and treated. It was wonderful. It was a perfect break. As we were saying, even if you love your life, you love taking a vacation from it now and again. And that got me thinking, and I made a tag. I made a tag called the Vacation Book Tag. And just a few questions, and I'll tag a bunch of people, and that'll be that. It's late in the day on Tag Tuesday in most of America, so probably none of you will get to this until next Tuesday if you do it at all. But I wanted to make a new tag and put it out there in the world. So the first question is, what is your favorite book about somebody taking a vacation? And for me, it's a novella. It's a slim little thing by L.P. Hartley. A lot of you might not know that name. His most famous book is The Go-Between. But also I noticed when I was looking around that his book, Eustace and Hilda, was reprinted by the New York Review of Books Classic Collection. So it'll be available as an affordable trade paperback. And Eustace and Hilda is incredible. It's incredibly good. It's a major work that nobody knows. The Go-Between is also very, very good. But L.P. Hartley also did a novella called Simonetta Perkins, about a young Boston ingenue who goes to Venice and falls in love with a gondolier. And there was a fad among such books. The M. Forster indulged in it, and so did a lot of other people who you'd never heard of. There was a fad among such books for the kind of vicarious wish fulfillment that Venice tends to provoke in people. And what the form that it took most often was for deeply suppressed and closeted gay male authors to make female protagonists that they could channel their own feelings into, so to speak. And those women would fall in love with a swarthy and extremely masculine gondolier, the exact dream that every closeted gay man had going to Venice for the last 150 years. In fact, they still might, if there are any closeted gay men anymore outside of the NFL, they still might have that dream. The dream is always that you're going to pick up some rough trade in a funny costume and that it's all going to work out. Why it would be gondoliers instead of anything else, I don't know. I guess maybe because it's a very picturesque and outdated occupation. But anyway, Simonetta Perkins is in many ways, I believe, L.P. Hartley. And the book is really good. The book is it's scathingly bitter and scathingly funny. It's over way too soon, which I always think is a mark of success for a novella. And that's probably my favorite. That probably beats out all others. Not only because I love this author and think that he really needs more attention, but also because I love Venice. Anyway, question number two. I will leave the questions down below, of course, because I want, of course, my original tag to go viral. Do you read travel writing? And if so, who are your favorites? Some of your favorites, anyway. Just feel free to dilate on any of your favorites. I listed three. The first one being Sarah Wheeler, whose book Terra Incognita, Travels in Antarctica, is, I think, incredible. It's got something witty and quotable on virtually every page. Just amazing. Then also I listed, might be a stretch to call this travel writing, but it's my tag, and I'm going to stretch just a little. It's Rebecca West. It's Black Lamb and Grey Falcon, which is a 1,000-page doorstop, one of the greatest works of nonfiction in the 20th century. And it is largely spined around the idea of traveling. It's just that Rebecca West takes that to such levels and such eloquence and such depth that it no longer really feels like, if this is Monday, this must be Budapest. It feels very different from that. It's an amazing work. I don't know how many of you are all stocked up on your March with the Mammoths. I'm not sure how many of you are all stocked up on your Chunksters for Charity. And I'm not sure how many of you like or have the time for a massive undertaking of a book. But if you do, this is one to try. It's now, in addition to many other editions that you can get in your used bookstore or online, it's also a Black Spine Penguin Classic, which I believe, I think I'm familiar with it as a purple trade paperback, a light purple trade paperback that was the book you could get forever and ever. But I believe the Black Spine Penguin trade paperback has an introduction by Christopher Hitchens. And if I remember correctly, the introduction by Christopher Hitchens is a little bit on the rare side by being more about Rebecca West and her book than it is about Christopher Hitchens, which is always a relief. So, and then my last one is a huge bestseller. Sarah Wheeler's books have been well received, but never huge bestsellers, never a viral, what we would now call a viral bestseller. And the same thing is true with Black Lamb and Grey Falcon. It was, originally, it was... some of the early editions were in 2 volumes. It's big and imposing. You can't expect it to take off and become a bottle rocket. But this one from 1897 was a huge bestseller, unexpectedly, because it was a market rife with this kind of book, and I attribute that to the singularity of the author and to her writing chops. And this is Mary Kingsley, Travels in West Africa, which used to be available as a Dover trade paperback and a bunch of other editions. I would be unsurprised, but very depressed to find that Travels in West Africa is not in print anymore. It ought to be a Penguin Classic. No doubt about it at all. It ought to be a Penguin Classic. It is thrilling, absolutely thrilling, to think the things and the places, the things that people of Mary Kingsley knew. And when it was published, it was a huge success. Just huge. You had people lining up outside bookstores. So, if you can find a copy, I have had copies in the past. I don't think I have one right now. If you can find a copy, I strongly recommend it. Those are 3 favorites. I'm sure, like a lot of you, I could probably come up with 20 more. But we're going to move on. We're going to move on to question number 3. What are your books on vacation rituals? And for this, I want to stress a nomenclature thing, because some of you I know have knocked around this wonderful world quite a bit. And so I want to stress that I'm talking here about vacations. I'm not talking about travel. I know that they're synonymous. Most people can't take a vacation without traveling, but I mean something that is a vacation, not your book rituals when you are moving to a new place or when you have business to conduct or a long stay or something like that, but when you are going on vacation. So you are paying or indulging in totally frivolous downtime in an exotic location. Okay, and under those conditions, under your books on vacation, because I have traveled an enormous amount, but I don't count that as vacationing. But I've also taken many vacations, and there are different rituals that underscore each one. When I was traveling, my book companions never changed. They were just the same small number of books that I never went looking for any new books, and I never changed that roundup. But when you're on vacation, my rituals are always different, and I'd love to hear about yours. Like, for instance, my book choice was always the most agonizing thing in packing for a vacation. It always took me the longest. I didn't really care what I was packing for clothes or anything like that, but I agonized over the books. And I would try to make a balance between long and short books. I'd try to make a balance between books I haven't read and books I have read, under the idea that you'd love to encounter something new and that you fall in love with when you're on vacation, but you also don't want to be trapped with something bad, so you have to bring some standbys or a cherished reread. And I always ended up a little bit regretting how many books I brought. On a week-long vacation, 2-week, 3-week vacation, I would bring a lot of books, and more than I could expect to read if I was going to enjoy myself or do anything other than read the whole time. Sometimes that ritual paid off, because sometimes, despite the best of intentions, you would get trapped somewhere where the weather or a tragedy or an emergency of some kind or an upheaval in the place where you were traveling made it impossible for you to do anything except read. And then I was well prepared, but most times I was a little annoyed, because you're bringing these books from your own collection, so you're not going to leave them behind. So you have to lug them everywhere. So, but I'd love to hear your rituals as well. Do you bring any books? All of the vacations that I'm talking about took place in the pre-internet era, so there was no possibility of bringing this device, this Macaulay Omnicom, this, from the Legion of Super. This is a technological marvel. We had nothing like it in the times that I'm talking about. I could put 100, 200, 300, 500 books on this thing, and all I need is an electrical outlet. That's all I have to be sure that I have, is an electrical outlet. And someday, I might not even need this. I might not even need that. If the whole back of this thing were a photoreceptor, a photovoltaic photoreceptor that wasn't just visible light, so ultraviolet light as well, so that this thing was constantly charging whenever it was in connection with the electromagnetic spectrum, as it easily could be made to do. It has a minuscule electrical charge. The back of this thing, if it were always on, so to speak, could keep this charge forever. No need to recharge. No need for a wall outlet and the right adapter or anything like that. But right now, that's all I need, is that. And I wouldn't have to agonize about books at all. I could bring the same collection of old and new books, and not worry about lugging things around. That would be wonderful. But I'm not. I don't. The vacations that I take tend to be very bookish now, so it's not a question of me wondering, about space concerns. Then let's see here. Question number 4 is, what's your favorite book you found or read for the first time while on vacation? And for me, it's Michael Shar's book, The Killer Angels, which I had had that book recommended to me forever, probably for 10 years. I'd had people recommending that book and saying, why haven't you got to this? You've got to get to this. It's a fantastic book. You love historical fiction. It's one of the best historical novels I've ever read. You love Civil War history. This is responsible Civil War history, historical fiction. You're not going to be annoyed by it. Why haven't you done this? And you know how it is. At first, you're receptive to that. And then after a while, it becomes oppressive. After a while of so many people telling you, why haven't you got to this book yet? You're going to love it. You have to read it. I sort of didn't want to. After a while, you start to resist that kind of thing, or I do anyway. I start to resist even the best intentioned peer pressure. So there was a vacation to Cape Cod where I didn't have that book with me. Of course, I didn't even have a copy. I had a bunch of other books, and as some of you know, when you go to houses on the Cape, whether you owned it or not. In this case, we owned the house, and it had been tenants who had left the book behind. But whether you own the house or not, there'll be a library. There'll be a little library of waterlogged and sandblasted books in that house, in every house. And The Killer Angels was right there. A battered mass market copy of The Killer Angels was right there in the house. And I thought, all right, well, you're on vacation. None of the chorus of peer pressure is around. No one knows you're doing it. Why don't you give 10 pages? Give it 10 pages. In 10 pages, it will certainly annoy you. And then you can just tell people, I tried it and I didn't like it, so you can shut up about it instead. I loved it. Absolutely loved it. The opening scene of The Killer Angels is, in my opinion, the only mistake that it makes. The only narrative mistake that it makes is the opening scene centers exclusively on a wretched spy who's willing to sell his information to Robert E. Lee. And it shouldn't, because that gives you, as an opening scene, it's not interesting enough to carry you on its own, and it gives you no idea of the rest of the book. The rest of the book is not about the common man's look at anything. It's about the presiding generals of the Confederate forces on the eve of the Battle of Gettysburg. So you get lots of Longstreet and lots of Pickett and lots of Lee. You don't get these grubby little opportunities. It's a much bigger and more idealistic book than the opening. The very first pages give you any idea, and that's a mistake. And I was ready to pounce when I saw it, but then I got past those opening pages, which don't go on for very long, and I was just blown away, and kept being blown away throughout the book. The game kept upping the whole time. So that's probably the foremost example of a book that I encountered, that I read for the first time while on vacation. I want to know yours. Then question number 5, have you ever light-fingered a book from a vacation stay? Have you ever gotten sticky fingers? Have you ever actually pocketed a book from a vacation stay where it wasn't one that you brought with you? And I am frankly shocked at even the implication that anyone would ever do that. So we're going to move right on. Question number 6 is some of your favorite books that are set in exotic locales. And that, of course, applies to pretty much everything, but I have 3 that I want to recommend. The first one is, of course, the book that is going to come to everybody's mind in anything called the vacation book tag, and that is Elizabeth von Arman's Enchanted April, about a group of women on vacation and how it changes their lives, or how they want it to. An absolute classic, and a book that I've read I don't know how many times. It never tires. You never tire of reading Enchanted April. It's just wonderful. And then The Towers of Trebizond by Rose Macaulay, which is, in my opinion, unbeknownst to him, a perfect Shawn the Book Maniac book. I feel certain that he would love it, but I love Rose Macaulay too. All of her fiction and all of her nonfiction. I think she's a tremendously talented writer. I wish that The Towers of Trebizond was in a Penguin Classic. I wish that all of her work were available in beautiful paperback editions. So at your bookstore, people just walk in and get it, but I'm sure that she's downloadable. I'm sure that she is. And The Towers of Trebizond is a fine place to start. I don't think she ever wrote anything bad. I think she was great from start to finish. And I can't say that about every author in the world. But the third one, those first 2 were set in exotic non-American locales. And the third one, I realized that some American locales would strike non-Americans or even some Americans as exotic, maybe not in the best possible way. And that immediately made me think of Richard Marinick's book, Boyos, which is set in the previous generation's South Boston. There was for a long time one of the outlying neighborhoods of Boston proper was South Boston, which was at the time of this book and the time that I knew it intimately, street by street, fire hydrant by fire hydrant, brick by brick, house by house. For a long stretch of its time, it was fiercely Irish American and Irish immigrant. It was a fiercely. It wasn't always that way, but it was for a long time. It was emblematically Irish. There are holdout cores of South Boston that are still that way today, but it has mostly ruthlessly gentrified, just ruthlessly. Most of those people are gone. Most of those families that have been there for generations in the same stilted walk-up building are gone. But Boyos takes you back to the heart of that time, and also to some of the worst of it. There was a Boston gangster named Whitey Bulger, who single-handedly killed a lot of South Boston. You always try to console yourself by saying one person can't ever do that much damage. I'm pretty sure that since 2016, in America anyway, no one is comfortable saying that anymore. And Whitey Bulger was the same thing, a totally opportunistic, grubby thug who managed to be in a position to flood South Boston with drugs and violence. And he did, and this book is a perfect evocation of that. So it is an exotic locale. It's just maybe not one that you'd rather read about it than visit it, I think. Then question number 7 is, do you think the coronavirus will kill us all? And yes, I do. And then question number 8, what was the last book you read while on vacation? And I actually know this because I just came back from vacation, and I read Death Count by L.F. Graff, which is a Star Trek novel from about 30 years ago, in which a maverick Andorian super scientist goes missing, and that is one pebble in the water, one pebble on that threatens to start an avalanche of many other little pebbles that might lead to war between the Andorians, who are founding members of the Federation of Planets, and the Orions, the Orion Syndicate is a pirate organization. They're not affiliated with the Federation. They're not affiliated with anybody. But a major war between those two could disrupt everything in the Federation and outside it. And that scientist disappearing is one of the pebbles that might start that. There's also subversion and spies, including maybe an Orion spy on board the USS Enterprise, which is caught, as usual, right in the flashpoint of everything. And the L.A. Graff, I believe, is a collection of authors. I think it's 2 or even 3 authors. I think one book that was written under the name L.A. Graff was actually written by only one person, but I don't think this was one of them. Not that it shows. You don't have seams or anything. It's a very involving book, very well done. And one of the things that it does, one of its approaches, that all of these old Star Trek books have one approach or another, and this is a common one, which is to center on the second tier of the Mighty Seven from the USS Enterprise, NCC 1701. You have Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. You have Scotty, who often is included in that, the top rank there. But then you have Uhura, Sulu, and Chekhov, and this book centers a lot of attention on Uhura, Sulu, and Chekhov to very good effect, especially Chekhov, who a lot of time writers don't have any idea what to do with him, because the main impression that Chekhov made on Star Trek viewers, including the viewers who went on to become Star Trek writers, was of a callow, impetuous, monkey-haired boy, a young boy, an impressionable young boy on the bridge of the Enterprise, who was largely comic relief, constantly making cultural claims for the heritage of Russia that he didn't have, and that weren't true, and that other characters would sort of laugh at. And Star Trek has been able to do wonderful jobs with watching most of the other characters grow old. We know that Scotty becomes more and more and more impressive, eventually becomes captain of engineering, eventually becomes a captain. We know that Uhura gets more and more impressive as she gets older. We know that Sulu becomes a captain, and probably later an admiral. We know all about Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. But Chekhov, nobody's really... everything about the Gene Roddenberry era of Star Trek sort of petered out before we could get much of a handle on Chekhov. We know that he is still a Starfleet officer at the time of Star Trek Generations, the death of Captain Kirk, but we don't know anything else. We don't, aside from fan fiction. There are fan shows, including some with fairly high budgets, in which we see Walter Koenig play Pavel Chekhov much later in life when he is a figure in the Federation. But I'm talking canon. And in canon, writers especially don't know what to do with Chekhov. They don't know what to make of him, especially since this novel is set a little bit later. It's not set during a time when Chekhov would be that youthful ensign. It's much later than that. So Chekhov's basically a blank slate. And that's bad when you're dealing with an IP, an intellectual property. When you're dealing with somebody else's property, then you've got the lawyers at Paramount just looking over your shoulder, and so you can't do whatever you want with Chekhov. Absolutely, you can't do that. You can't even do it with Sulu. We know from Star Trek Generations that Sulu had a child, and Demora Sulu is old enough to be a bridge member of the next Starship Enterprise when we meet her. Which means if you do a little bit of creative backdating, you can pretty much guess when Sulu must have had a wife, a family, when he must have held his baby daughter in his hands. None of that is anywhere even alluded to anywhere in Star Trek. So the fiction can't even go there. Paramount won't even let you go there because they might want to make a story on that, because you don't get to do that. And you especially don't get to fill in blanks on something like Chekhov. So I thought the book did a really good job considering the straitjacket that it was under. That was the last book I read on vacation. But I want to know yours. I want to know the answer to all these questions. And then the last thing to do is to tag people. And I have a bunch of people I want to tag. I want to tag Sarah at Steeped in Books, Liz Schubert. I want to tag Mark at Richardson Reads, of course, who was my host during this vacation. I want to tag Paperback Junky. I want to tag Scott at Book Invasion. I don't think I've ever tagged him before. I want to do that. I want to tag Pints and Paperbacks. See, I don't know how many vacations he's taken, but or whether or not he's nicked a book while he's been on vacation. I guess I'll find out. Then Brian at Bookish. I want to tag Peg at the History Shelf. I want to tag Roz at Scallydandling about the books. If you don't, I'll link to all of these channels. If you don't know Roz's channel, you really should find it because it's wonderful. I want to tag Shawn, the Book Maniac, in case. The main reason I want to tag him is because he's always nice enough to tag me when he makes an original tag. And that is... Oh, that's right. I also want to tag Britta, of course. And that is it. That is the vacation book tag, an original from yours truly. And this is positively, absolutely, 100% the last video I'm going to make today. So I will see you tomorrow. Thank you, BookTube.